Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Workforce Excellence Show. This week we'll be talking about all things employee engagement and employee experience. My name is Roshan McBride and I am joined here by Jo Moffatt. So Jo is the Managing Director of the specialist ad agency Woodreed. She has over 30 years experience with Woodreed, helping business leaders from a range of sectors market their organisations both externally to their customers and internally to their employees. Jo is also closely involved with the not-for-profit Engage for Success movement, and she has been since its launch in 2012. So thank you for being here with us today, Jo. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So would you be able to elaborate just a little bit on what I said there? Could you tell us a bit about Woodreed and what your philosophy is? And for anyone that doesn't know, could you tell us a little bit about the Engage for Success movement?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's just start with Woodreed. So yes, that's my business. I founded the agency, well, as you say, quite some decades ago now. And our approach has been for the last, for the last sort of 12, 13 years, really, a recognition that organisations invest huge amounts in their brands. They invest huge amounts in their brands and their marketing to engage consumers. And the power that brands have to engage people is an emotional engagement, and that emotional engagement that we all experience with as consumers is a very powerful form of engagement. It's much more powerful at driving behaviour than rational engagement. You know, what's kind of going on in our heads.
Yeah.
What goes on in your hearts is really key. And what we've been seeing as I suppose what you'd call a kind of traditional marketing agency was that so many organizations were wasting the value of their brand to engage their people. You know, they were using, their people were very much the sort of second-class citizens, the last to know, the people who are on the end of the list of people you need to brief things to and engage people with. And so much the focus was with external communication and marketing to prospective clients and consumers, and the audience were very much the poor relation. The internal audience were very much the poor relation, and that seemed a massive missed opportunity when an organisation has invested so much in their brand and their brand equity and their brand values. Why on earth would you not use that brand and that thinking to engage your people? So, in essence, our philosophy is about saying treat your people like customers, and that means really climbing inside their heads, getting insight into what makes them tick, applying the techniques, the creativity, the quality, the rigor, and the brand thinking of the marketeer, but doing it internally. So we fuse that brand thinking with employee engagement principles, which is kind of where Engage for Success comes in. So, as you say, I've been involved with Engage for Success for many years now. And Engage for Success is the UK's leading not-for-profit movement that focuses on employee engagement. So it is a movement that is entirely volunteer-driven. So everybody involved in it has a day job of one sort or another. They're either on the kind of consultancy side of the fence like I am, or they're in academia, or a considerable number of them are sort of on the practitioner side of the fence, so working inside organisations. And Engage for Success grew out of a government commissioned report, sometimes known as the McLeod report, which you may well have heard of, called Engaging for Success. And that was commissioned by the government to look at what is employee engagement. Does it matter? If it does, can we put some kind of figure on its impact on the UK economy? And are there some lessons that we can learn from organisations who actually are getting this stuff right, that we can kind of bottle and sprinkle like kind of magic dust across the rest of the UK economy? And Engage for Success, really, its purpose is to shine a light on that best practice, to inspire workplaces and people to thrive, because we all spend an enormous amount of time at work. And it it needs to be, wherever that may be, given current circumstances. But it needs to be a good experience for that to be sustainable. But also, of course, from an organisation's perspective, there are so many absolutely solid arguments as to why putting your people at the heart of your thinking makes good business sense as well, in terms of profitability and a whole raft of other core business KPIs that are impacted by it. And Engage for Success is about really raising awareness of that. And so it fuses very very, very well in terms of the thinking with what I'm trying to do with Woodreed, with the clients we work for, which really range from large PLCs to public sector organisations, as well as some other smaller organisations and not-for-profits as well. So that's me and us.
Okay, so we've mentioned employee engagement a lot kind of over the past few minutes. So maybe you can explain, what is employee engagement and why is it so important today?
The definition that I personally quite like, and I'm not going to claim credit for it because it's not mine, it's one I came across many years ago from HSBC, actually, the financial services company, and they describe an engaged employee as someone who has the skills to leave but the desire to stay.
That's a good
And
definition.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that one as well.
It's nice
Yeah.
and simple. There are some incredibly convoluted and complicated and complex definitions of employee engagement, but personally, I like that one because it just, it says it really for me.
Yeah.
The skills to leave, the desire to stay.
Brilliant.
That's what it is.
So another term that I hear a lot of would be the employee voice. So could you explain to us what is meant by the employee voice?
Yes. So one of the things, and I'll touch on this possibly a little bit later on, but one of the things that Engage for Success, or the original Engaging for Success report, identified was, are there some characteristics that organisations with highly engaged workforces share? And they identified four things, and they're called the four enablers. And as I say, I'll touch on them a little later. But one of those is employee voice. And basically, what we mean by that is organisations that recognise that their people can very often have the answers to the challenges that they're facing as a business, can contribute creatively and bring innovation, and if they are only asked, will have the answers and will be willing and able to engage with their organisation in creating the answers and developing change and making strategy stick and delivering on business objectives. So what do we mean what do we mean by employee voice? Employee voice is simple. It's basically saying, I will listen to what my people have to say. I want to hear what my people have to say, and I will actively involve them in the decision making of my business. What it isn't is a survey every year or a survey every couple of years. That can be part of it, but it sure as heck isn't the full solution. I like to think of it in this way. If you meet somebody, back in the day when we used to go out and meet people, we used to go to meetings. You'd be introduced to somebody and they'd say, "How are you?" And actually, sometimes they meant that. And sometimes they really they wanted to know how you were and learn and listen and respond. And sometimes they're just saying that, "Hi, how are you? How are you, Roisin? Actually, I'm not listening to your answer. I've already moved on to talk to some, in my mind, I'm already thinking about something else." It's a sort of automatic, they're doing it on autopilot. And sometimes an employee engagement survey is seen as employee engagement, and it's almost that. It's an autopilot thing. It's a tick box thing. We'll do a survey once a year or once every 2 years. So we're doing employee engagement, aren't we? Well, no. You may be thinking you're listening to the employee voice, but if you're not really hearing what they're saying, and absolutely if you're not responding back and sharing the results of that and demonstrating what you're doing as a result, then you really are just going through the motions, and that's not true employee voice. True employee voice is when you involve your people in helping you to understand the issues that you're facing, find solutions to them. And we're seeing a lot of that at the moment with COVID-19, recognition that actually if we only listen to people about how they can make this new world work better, then we'll get somewhere. And I've seen and heard loads of organisations tell stories about the extent to which, just by listening to employee voice, they've come up with solutions they would never have found before. There's some really interesting statistics. If you were to ask engaged employees 83% of them would say that work brings out their most creative and innovative ideas. And if you ask that same question of disengaged employees, only 3% say that they feel creative and innovative at work. So we want, as employers, we want our people to be creative and innovative and coming up with new ways. Sometimes that's uncomfortable, sometimes that's challenging, what are we going to do with these, how do we deal with these ideas and these thoughts? But God, you have to find a way to listen and respond and demonstrate that you value the contribution that your people make. So that's what employee voice is.
So recently, it has kind of been said that employee engagement just isn't quite enough anymore, and that organizations should strive to have a great employee experience. So from my understanding, employee experience would be like the culmination of employee engagement and culture. Do you agree with that? Is that the way forward now?
Interesting one. I think sometimes there can be a desire to find a new label, a new name, and what's driving that? What's driving that desire worries me, because sometimes that desire to say, "Oh, employee engagement's dead. Long live employee experience."
Yeah.
What's the rationale behind that? Is it simply to create LinkedIn content? I'm being very cynical here, but is that just driving huge amounts of LinkedIn content and profile raising and all the rest of it? In my view, I don't really want to get too hung up on the labels.
Okay.
But I think the point you made is leads me to where my head is at, really, which is I think there's a bit of a virtuous circle here.
Yeah.
And if you create a great experience for your employees, then they are going to be engaged.
Yeah.
If you are working with a bunch of colleagues who are engaged in the work that you are doing together, that is a great experience for you all. There is a mutuality and a virtuous circle going on here. And I think that I don't want to get hung up on either term. There is a worry sometimes that if you start applying these labels, you start going down the kind of shiny new toy territory.
Yeah.
And if you go down the shiny new toy territory, then things become a bit tick boxy. They become a bit processy. Oh no, we're not doing employee engagement anymore. We do employee experience.
Yeah. Well,
no, hang on. That or it's Friday. We must do employee experience. We'll do employee engagement on Monday. It's crazy. Being cynical again, facetious, but I think labels can take us down a bit of a dead end debate, and I'd much rather people spend the time thinking actively about how they can create a working environment where people are engaged and where they have a great experience.
So where do you see technology playing a role in all of this engagement or experience, or I suppose we won't put a label on it then?
Put a label on it. Well, I use them interchangeably very often, but I think that's the point. They are totally, they feed each other. Technology, oh goodness me, Roisin, it's absolutely, it's the best thing we've had. It's marvelous, it's created so much opportunity to make it easy to build those sorts of relationships and build the sort of environment where engagement and experience is positive. We've only got to look at what's happened over the last 3 months. I mean, good grief, where would we be without technology? So I think technology is absolutely crucial. In my own experience, I've done quite a lot of work with enterprise social networking platforms, and the impact of them has been phenomenal. It enables you so often to go from a situation where internal communication kind of comes from the top of the organization out, and maybe you find a way then to gather some of that back. But the beauty of technology so often is it enables a sort of cross-fertilization of interaction as well. You building communities and engagement up and down and across, and that can be really, really powerful. technology can put the CEO into somebody's front room. Now that may it's got its advantages and disadvantages for everybody, but it makes these things possible. It can take you away from the the rigid sort of town hall talking to the masses type of approach, and being much more human. And I think the future of work is very much around people being much more human. So goodness, technology phenomenally important, and is only going to become so more and more, and we have no idea of the capability. But I think we mustn't think that technology is the answer. It's not an instead of humanity. It's not instead of human interaction. It enables humanity,
exactly.
and human interaction, and isn't the channel, whatever piece of tech or channel you create, in itself doesn't create the environment we're seeking to create. It is an enabler for us as humans to make these things better and easier and more and quicker. I think that's the key.
So do you have any examples of any companies that are really setting the benchmark for employee experience?
Goodness me, so many, Roisin. So many. But of course, what's happened in the last few months has sort of thrown the world up into the air, and we're still seeing everything. The bits are still falling around us. I personally, there's some cracking examples that I often talk about. I'll talk about John Lewis partnership. I'll talk about Pret, the sandwich shop. But if I talk about them now, people will say, hang on a minute, Pret are just announced plans to close X number of stores. John Lewis are closing X number of stores. They're talking about making people redundant and so on and so forth. It's not so great, is it? Well, I would probably argue back on that, my goodness me, how much worse could it have been? You can't think about employee engagement, employee experience as a silver bullet. It's not going to immune you against the economic challenges that we're going to be facing. It's not going to sort of insulate you entirely against needing to make difficult decisions when the macro economy is going through the kind of challenges that we're facing. But it can help make it better. It can help to minimize the impact. It can make the experience better for your people. If you are laying people off, making people redundant, doing it with a humanity and best of intentions and a clear laying out of your longer term purpose and all of the rest of it, and get all these things right, it will be a better experience all round. So yes, there's some examples, but it's difficult to cite them because we're all facing unforeseen challenges. But just at the start of lockdown, one of the things that I do with Engage for Success is I co-host a weekly radio show podcast, where we invite people to come on and tell us stories about their experiences in employee engagement, culture change, whatever. And just at the start of lockdown, I had the CEO of Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, Paul Barber, on the show. And they are in the Premier League. And the story he tells is a fabulous one. I mean, they absolutely... You could go through everything they do, and the four enablers are in there. They're absolutely at the heart of it. And he doesn't necessarily call them that, doesn't think about it in those terms, but they are, as a football club, their values underpin absolutely everything that they do. And their employee engagement is superb. And for example, they make sure that all their workers get access to nutritionists and dietitians and a quality food in the same way that their elite athletes do. So they approach their employee engagement at the football club as if they are as an elite sports organisation, which of course they are, but they've got their elite team, the squad. They make sure that everybody acts in an elite sporting way throughout the club. So that's a fascinating tale, actually. And just at the start of lockdown, when their Premiership football was stopped halfway through the season, Paul was talking about, well, we're still going to pay our casual workers who come in on a Saturday, or should be coming in on a Saturday to man the ground and the stadium on match day. These guys and girls, we pay them, casuals. They're not. They need that money. We're still going to pay them, even though we've got no football. It's that kind of attitude is really,
that's brilliant.
Really powerful. But lots of great examples, and you're seeing, there's you can see a lot of chatter on social media about good examples, but equally a lot of chatter about people who are getting it badly wrong. But we're not going to go down the name and shame route.
Okay. So do you think now, as we do return to work after the COVID-19 lockdown, that for some companies, employee engagement might kind of take a back seat or be put on the back burner? Do you think that might become an issue?
Inevitably, yeah. I think it will, and that would be a big mistake. But it is the easy, easy solution to sort of think, gosh, we just got to focus on this, and a sort of tunnel vision around survival and cut costs and everything else. And I totally understand that. So yes, I think there is a risk of that. But equally, I think that there is a really interesting groundswell of discussion and awareness and debate about a new type of workplace. People are talking about building back better rather than going back to normal.
Yeah.
And there is an awful lot of conversation and practical demonstration that some people are starting to think about the future in a slightly different way around a concept called social capitalism or responsible capitalism or stakeholder capitalism. And that's basically saying that actually it's not a debate between profit and people. You can actually achieve both of those things. I would say, Danone, for example, it was announced a couple of weeks ago. Danone, the big French-owned dairy manufacturer, they've changed their corporate structure to one that it's something to do with French law, but basically they're going to be pursuing a more community. They're taking a bigger stake in terms of social responsibility and community responsibility in the environment and the communities in which they work. So it is a sense that it's not all about shareholder value. It's not all about delivering shareholder value. That is not the be all and end all. Yes, the shareholders will need to get some value, but actually we need to think about our employees, our partners, the communities in which we work, the wider environment. And there's a move. I'm seeing a move towards that. There's a really interesting book that I would recommend called Grow the Pie. I've even got it here, which is marvellous. I'm ploughing through it at the moment, but it's by a guy called Alex Edmonds, and he is a professor of economics at the London Business School. And if we're talking about making the argument to financial directors that actually there is a sustainable and better way to do things in the future, he absolutely gets it. He's an economist, and it's hard-nosed evidence of how organizations it's not a trade-off between people and profit. You can have both, and that's very much at the heart of this whole concept of shareholder capitalism, which is a broader audience who will benefit from why a business is there and what an organization is there for. So yes, I think to answer your question, there's a risk that people will batten down the hatches, but that's a big mistake. And actually history has shown, the evidence shows that those organizations who think longer term, investing in their people, investing in their brands, actually investing in their marketing, because it's the same argument is applied externally too, are actually the ones that do better in the long term. So it's something that people need to consider, I think.
So what are some of the most common mistakes that you have seen companies make, especially those with a largely deskless workforce, like just say in the manufacturing industry or something like this?
And that comes back to one of your questions way early on about technology. A sense that, they're not on a computer all day, so we can't use tech to talk to people. Well, actually you can. Some really interesting research that, goodness me, who was it now? Heathrow Airport did some research with their people, their frontline people who are not on computers all the time, people in security and departure areas and that kind of thing, and asked them, how would you like to be communicated about organisational news? And the overwhelming response was through my own device, on my own PC.
Yeah.
But there's been a fear of that. There's a fear in organisations that they can't talk to people through their own personal devices. Now, that may have been the case a few years ago. There was, when people have problems with contracts that limit their data, they might well resent their employer sending them stuff and using up their data allowances. But increasingly now, people have got pretty much unlimited data contracts. And if you don't ask, you won't know. Make it an optional thing, but ask the question. We did some work some years ago with a financial services company, and we wanted to use SMS messaging. And this was SMS messaging to personal mobiles, because the vast majority of their people didn't have company mobiles, they were their personal device. And they were very well, oh no, we can't do that. That wouldn't work at all. And anyway, we got them to agree to try it, and they tried it, and over 48% of their people engaged with weekly SMS messaging. It was around values and behaviours, and it was supporting a new culture programme. And over 48% of their people happily and positively engage back through SMS. So you don't know until you try. But I do think possibly the biggest mistake is not being brave enough to try things. Have a go, ask the question. Don't assume that you know what your people will want and how your people will want to engage. And as I say, that comes back to where technology can really play a part for you.
Thank you very much, Jo. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of the Workforce Excellence Show. It was great to have you, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Rishi. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No problem. Thank you.